Okay, so let's cover if function, ifs function, and logical test. Let's start with logical test. So first of all, let's understand how it actually works. So I'm gonna go ahead and type logical test so far. Let's understand what logical test is, right? So I'm gonna start with an equal sign. And what I'm going to do a comparison. And basically what I'm going to do is highlight this number, which is in E2 cell, and I'm going to do greater than sign and then 10. And what this is a comparison operator. So the first equal sign is always we're about to enter a formula. Our real formula is here. So the formula is E2 is greater than 10, which is a logical test. So basically we're asking Google Sheets if the number in the cell is greater than 10. And if we hit enter, we get true, which means it is greater. Now, if I drag this down, you'll see that as long as it's greater than 10, it says true. Now let's put a different number. Let's ask if the number is greater than 200. And I'm gonna copy this down. We should see everything that's greater than 200 gets a true, and everything that's not gets a false. So this is what we call a logical test. So you have a couple of options here. Let's do one of the numbers here. So one of the numbers here is 166.98, right? So I'm gonna do 166.98. So I'm asking if the number is greater than that. We should get, see, this is not greater. This number, which is 166.98, is not greater than 166.98. So obviously we get what we get a false. Now what if we want to include that number in it, right? We want to include 166.98. So what we can do greater than or equal to. It's important to do the equal sign after the greater than sign, not before. Otherwise it's not gonna work. So I'm going to copy this down, and you can see now this number, it's greater than or equal to, so we get a true. So that works. Now the same way you can do comparative operators as smaller than or equal to, and finally you can do equal to. And so if you look at this formula for the first time, it may kind of look a little weird, I guess, because it's equal then equal. But again, as I said, the first equal sign always means something different in your formula. Because first equal sign is we're about to type formula, and everything else is the actual formula. So the formula is E2 equals 166.98. So we're asking, is the number equal to that number? So if I copy this down, well, these are not equal, but this one is equal to, so we get a true. So this is what we call a logical test. So again, to just go through different options you have, you can do greater than or equal to, smaller than or equal to, and equal to. There's also this one, which is not equal to. There it is, all of the options you have. Now let's go ahead and use this logical test. So the most common use for a logical test is if function. If function is not the logical test, it's just a function that uses a logical test. So we're gonna go equals and type our if function. I'm gonna hit tab to autofill. So the first thing is this logical expression or the logical test, what I was talking about. So I'm gonna ask, is this number greater than or equal to 200? So that's our logical expression. I'm gonna do comma, and that logical expression, if you remember, either returns true or false. So the next thing is value if true after the comma. So if this logical test returns a true, what do we want to do in that case? So the most basic thing would be you would want to type some sort of text in there, right? So you would say high number. And again, because it's text, I use quotes around it. Comma again. So the third is value if false. So what if this logical expression instead of true is false? So we say low number. And quotes because it's text. Hit enter. So now you see that I have low number for everything that's not greater than or equal to 200, and everything that's higher we get a high number or low number. So we could use this to do a lot of different things, right? We could use this to categorize sales. We could do this in other more complicated scenarios. Let's do some examples. So first of all, let's say we wanted to mark everything that's above $400 as a high-end product. So we could call this something like product category. And we could say if this number is greater or equal to 400, then we're going to call it high-end product, comma. Otherwise, we're going to call it, I guess, other. Close the parentheses, hit enter, and that should say other. And if I send this down, did that by doing double click here in the corner, by the way, you could see that everything that's above $400 or equals to $400 is now marked as a high-end product. This could be useful if you want to do some sort of pivot table analysis and you want to see how much your total is for high-end product versus your total for all the other products. So that's a very basic use for something like an if function. Now, the good thing about if function is that you don't just have to type text as a result. What you can do, you can actually do formulas based on your logical test. So you can actually use a cell reference, you can output a number, you can do a whole another formula over here in case it's true or in case it's false. So let's do an example of that. So let's say we want to do something like this. What we want to do, we want to figure out what a profit margin is for our products. And if that profit margin is lower than the number we want, we would like to increase the price for that product. First of all, how do we get the margin, right? So let's do profit margin. And we'll start with our equal sign, and that's going to be basically our cost of goods divided by our sales. We should do 1 minus that. So that's our profit margin. So we have 37% margin on this product. I'm going to double click to send this down. So that's our profit margins. So let's go ahead and convert this to percentage just to make it look nice, I guess. So you can see that we have different profit margins. Some of them is 37%, some of them are only 19% profit margin, and some of them high, some of them don't. In some cases, it's a negative number. Apparently, in this case, the cost is higher than the price for the product right now. So we definitely don't want that to happen. So anything that's a negative profit margin, we want to increase the price for that product by 20%. Not only negative, I guess if we find out that we even have like 5% profit margin, we'll want to increase the price. Great, so I'm gonna do new price column. And I'm gonna do equals if, so that's my logical test. I'm gonna ask if this profit margin is less than 5%, comma, what we want to do, we're going to take the current price for the product, which is the E2, and we're going to increase it by 20%, which is multiplied by 1.2. That will increase it by 20%, comma, otherwise we'll just leave the price as is. So value if false. So otherwise we'll just keep the same number, which is E2. So this is an example of using formulas and references inside of your if statement right now. So there it is. We go ahead and hit enter, and you can see because this was higher in profit margin than our 5%, it's not going to do anything. It's going to keep the same number. However, if I send this down, we should find some products that are hopefully, where are they? It's still doing something. It's not letting me scroll down. So finally, there it is. So this is a negative profit margin, right? So in this case, it should actually effectively change the price. You can see how instead of 225 and 12, we did increase the price by 20%, and that's our new price. Another thing we could possibly want to do here is simplify this. So let's say we didn't want to add this separate column, we could just expand this. So what we did, we compared if this H2, which is our calculation, is smaller than 5%. So if we didn't want this column here, we can really just take this formula, and note that when I go inside of this formula, I'm not copying the whole formula, I just copy the formula without the equal sign. I'm gonna copy that, hit escape to get out of it without making any changes. I'm gonna go back here, instead of H2, I want to do that calculation, and I'm gonna do that in parentheses. So I'm gonna do that calculation, and then I'm going to compare, is it less than 5%? So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to double click to send this down. And this should actually achieve exactly the same result as before. Now, one thing that I'm not sure about with Google Sheets is when you double click, it doesn't seem like when you do it for the second time, it works. See, as I double click, it didn't send it down, which is kind of a little annoying. I think it's kind of like a bug. I'm going to go here, Control Shift arrow key down, and I'll just delete this to clear this out, and then I'll go back hopefully, and if I double click now, that should work. So there it is, I sent it down, and the advantage of this is that I now don't need this profit margin column at all, so I can go ahead and delete it, and I can get my new pricing, new column, just like that. So the point here is that you really can do anything as your true or false value. It doesn't have to be like a hard-coded number or a hard-coded text, just pretty much anything. Now, if what you want as a result is just a number, right? Then you just type the number. So for example, if I wanted 0 in all the other cases, I would just type 0. I don't use quotes because it's a number, and then it would just be 0. Just like that. That wouldn't make a lot of sense right here, but that's an example that we can do that. So I'm going to undo a couple of times. So that's that. So that's how we can use our if function. That's the most basic if function. Now let's get to a function called ifs. Now, ifs function is fairly new in 2017. I guess that's when it came around, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. I believe in Excel it came in 2016. So ifs function is similar to if function with one difference. You can do multiple logical tests. Now, before we had if functions, we had to do all this what we called nested if functions. So you had to use a lot of if functions inside of other if functions and all this crazy stuff. Now we don't have to do a lot of it because we have this ifs function. So I guess what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to create a new column of our regions using our ifs function. Regions. And what I will do if the region is, for example, like California or it's Nevada, right? MV, I would like to label that as a region Western. Let's do that. So I'm going to start by ifs. So the first thing in our ifs function is going to be condition 1. So the condition 1 is basically that logical test we're talking about. So what we're going to do, we're going to ask, is this equal to, and because it's text, I'm going to write that equal sign and I'm going to do it in quotes. You can see here still in formula bar. I'm going to say if that is CA for California, right? And that's our logical test. So that if that's true, comma, then what do we want to say? We want to say Western, and that's just text, comma. So if it's not that, so again, I'm going to check if that same C2 is equal to NV for Nevada. Then again, after the comma, we're going to call this Western. I did double S there. Right, so for now, I'm just going to close this and hit enter. Okay. So we get NA. So let's scroll down. So there it is. So you can see how California got Western, Nevada got Western, and everything else gets NA because there's no match. So that's what we get as a result. Now, let's see what else we can do about this. We can obviously keep chaining other arguments. So we can also then do another command, though, if C2, that same one, equals to, I don't know, IL for Illinois, right? Then we're going to call this Midwestern. So now we should have another state in there. So there it is, Midwestern, and everything else should say NA. But at some point, you'll probably want to say everything else, just label it something. So how do you do that everything else thing? Now, the only way you're going to find out how you do it is, again, this function works with this logical test and the value for logical test pair that you have. And you basically just keep going after the comma, and you go for the next one, for the next one, for the next one. Now, one thing you really have to know about this function is that it goes left to right. And what that means, it's first going to check if this is California, and if it is, it's gonna assign this. So if it does find that it's California and it assigns this, it's not gonna do checks for all of these other conditions. It just checks this one. And if it's true, that's it. It does this and gets out of it. Now, if it's not true and it's false, it's gonna go to this next one, which is MV, and then it's gonna do Western as a result of that. Now, I'll show you an example of this with a number, and you'll see exactly what I mean by this. But for now, let's figure out how to do else statement, which is everything else. So the way we do it, usually we do a comma, and this is where we do our logical test, right? And what do we do when we do a logical test? If you remember when I did it initially, and I asked if the number is greater than something, it used to just say true or it used to say false. So the logical test always outputs either true or it outputs false. And we don't really have to do logical test in these functions, like if function. We can actually just do the output of the logical test. So if I just simply say true, which would be the result of a logical test, but in this case, it's always gonna be true. And basically what's gonna happen is gonna go left to right. And if all of these fail, then it's gonna hit this true, and this true is basically definitely gonna pass because it's true. And it's gonna do what we assign to this. So I'm gonna do other. And now if I copy this down, we should see that if it doesn't match the other ones, then it's just gonna do other. So that's the way you do else, by doing this true value and do the other. So that's our ifs function. And so far I used it on this state. So now I want to dig deeper into that part where I was saying it goes left to right and how it exactly works. So let's say we want to categorize our sales. So remember before I did this category, I did high-end product and I did other. So let's say I want to separate this into a few different brackets. I want to do a high-end product, but then I also want to have like a mid-range product and maybe low-end products, 3 different categories of products. So far we've assigned that our high-end products are $400 and above. So I'm going to modify this formula with our ifs function instead. So I'm going to start with my ifs. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask, is this number that I have greater than or equal to 400? Which is that bracket that we had before, right? And if it is, I'm going to do in quotes high-end product. So that's my high-end product. So I'm going to do comma. Now after this, the next one we have, we're going to again ask, is that number greater than or equal to? So let's say the next product range I have is above 200 included. So I'm going to do comma, and that's going to be mid-range product. Quotes closed, comma. And finally, for everything else, I'm going to say lower end product. So, and the everything else is the true argument. So true low end product. Close the quotes, close the parentheses, hit enter, and we should get low end product. Now again, I cannot double click because of that thing I talked about. Hopefully they'll fix it, but for right now I'm going to go to the next one, Control Shift arrow key down. I'll delete this and go up, and by the way, I did Control up to get there, and I'll double click in this corner, and that should send it down. And now we should categorize our product into low end, mid range, and high end products. And this is where that thing that I was talking about comes in, that it goes left to right. And what that means that, for example, in this particular case, is going to check if this first is greater than 400. Now it is not greater or equal to 400, so it's obviously not going to do this. But then it's going to go to the next one. The next one is going to say it's greater or equal to 200, and it is. So it's going to do mid-range product. And once it does that, it's not going to continue, because otherwise it would have now done this true and do low-end product as well. So it doesn't. So once it meets a true criteria, it doesn't keep going and checking other if conditions. So that's why it goes left to right. Important to note. And that's why this actually works the way it works. So again, so if we go another example for a high-end product, so in this case, it checks if it's greater or equal to 400, and it says yes it is. So it puts high-end product as a result, and once it finds the match in the first one, then it doesn't really check all the other ones. So there we have our results. So that's it for our if and ifs functions. At least that should cover some of the most common and useful examples with these functions. At some point, I'll also cover and or functions that you can use in combination with this. But for now, this is it. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for new videos.